Hey everyone, Joey here, aka Animus, and welcome to the second part in my vinyl
Your mic's not actually on.
of spinnable.
Joey.
Let's just get into this, starting off with BT, who has actually created some of my favourite albums of all time, and possibly my #1 favourite album ever, this Binary Universe, but sadly, not a lot of them past the millennium are actually on vinyl, which is really disappointing to me, but I have got a few 12-inch singles of his. First up, Embracing the Sunshine, Sasha mixes. This is from his Ema days, Ema being his debut album, which is a lot more of an uplifting trance kind of style compared to his later work. Really cheesy artwork here, but some real chunky trance voyages on here. Also from Ema, I have 12-inch single of Nocturnal Transmission and Poseidon. I'm cracking up because this was basically a cautionary tale to me. I left it out in direct sunlight on my turntable, and it's ended up with an absolutely atrocious warp which renders it unplayable, and that's very disappointing, but I'm just happy that it wasn't one of my more treasured and valuable records, because that could have been an absolute disaster. Next here I have Flaming June, which is probably his most classic and iconic trance track he ever made. It is absolutely brilliant, comes out of the speakers like a jack-in-the-box. I'd say this was an essential record for trance fans, and I really hope to finally pick up a copy of his 1997 album ESCM, which this comes from at some point, if I could manage to find one for a decent price. And final BT record, I have Godspeed from Movement in Still Life. Somewhat a bit of a spiritual successor to Flaming June. Doesn't hit quite the same heights, but comes extremely close. Fantastic melody on this one. Anyway, moving on from BT, we have a record from Burial, Untrue. I'd say many would consider this to be a classic electronic album. Very dark and moody, sort of dark ambient and garage crossover. A lot of sampling going on here, but it creates this really dingy, murky and distinctly British atmosphere, which is fantastic to listen to at night. Reissue here on really chunky 180-gram heavyweight discs. Brilliant stuff. And now I've got a bit of Kate Bush vinyl here, very different musical style from what I've just been going through. This is The Kick Inside, her debut album, which I got from my mum, because my mum has always been a massive Kate Bush fan and kind of got me into her. I'm pretty much obsessed and trying to collect all of her albums. Such a unique voice and creative mind. This debut album here isn't as experimental as her later work, but shows masses and masses of promise. She uses a much higher register on here, and Wuthering Heights is just an absolute masterpiece of a track, pretty undeniably. Then I also have her second album, its follow-up, Lionheart, a fairly similar style to The Kick Inside. Maybe my least favourite Kate Bush album, but that's really not saying much. I still think it's very good, and as I said, I think they're all worth owning. You've got kind of two alternate covers, one on the front and one on the back. Sadly, this isn't a brilliant copy. It's got some funny stains on the inside here, so I'll probably try and look for a slightly more expensive but better condition copy of this album at some point. I'm missing album number 3, Never Forever, but we move on to album number 4, The Dreaming, which is where I really start to adore her work. Absolutely wild record here, and I think this is where she really came into her own with her more experimental styles in vocals and production. Unlike anything I've ever heard before, and an addictive listen. Keep putting this on over and over again to try and find new details in it. Extremely unconventional, but absolutely enthralling. This isn't an original pressing, this is a 180-gram repress from a few years back. And of course we gotta have Hounds of Love. This is another reissue, which I'm actually yet to fully take the shrink wrap off. This has just got to be my favourite album of hers, going with the obvious pick, but oh my god, this thing is incredible from front to back. You've got side A, which is 5 tracks of pop perfection, but side B, I think, is what makes this album just one to go down in the history books. Subtitled The Ninth Wave, which is essentially like an art pop suite following this story of a woman who's like stranded overboard from a ship in a life jacket, drifting in the sea and gradually losing consciousness and going into these weird visions and dreams. It is just unbelievably creative. Must be listened to from front to back, that specific set of tracks, and is probably like my favourite thing she's ever done. Absolute masterpiece. Just fixed the audio, I'm very sorry about that. Let's continue. Next up, I actually have C418's Minecraft Volume Alpha. It's a very basic pick, but Minecraft probably has to be my favourite video game of all time because of the number of brilliant memories I have of playing this game since the age of about 6 or 7. One of my massive favourite things about Minecraft is its atmosphere, created by C418's fantastic soundtrack work here. Minecraft Volume Alpha is a collection of more ambient and piano-based cuts, which are just absolutely gorgeous and calming and peaceful and beautiful, and have many very, very strong nostalgic connections for me. So I adore just putting this record on completely out of the context of the game. This is on green translucent vinyl, which looks very cool. Unfortunately, it's not one of the best sounding records in my collection by any means. Weirdly, they cut down the soundtrack from the digital version, but left, like, a really big run-out groove. There was a bit of muck, even fresh out of the packet, but it's still perfectly listenable, and probably my favourite video game soundtrack of all time. And continuing the Minecraft soundtrack, I also have Volume Beta, or whatever you want to say, which came out more recently. I did a whole video unboxing this one. This volume is more focused on music from the creative mode, which is a little bit more upbeat and danceable, and it is cut down from the digital release again, but still 2 discs of brilliant music, including some tracks that aren't actually from the game and are exclusive to this release. You've got Alpha, which is a 10-minute orchestral suite with some of the tracks from Minecraft Volume Alpha, which really tugs at your heartstrings as a Minecraft fan. And even The End, which is a 15-minute dark ambient cut, which really caught me off guard, but is actually fantastic with its sound design. This is a release with a lenticular cover, which I've rarely seen, and also comes on possibly the most beautiful looking discs in my entire collection. It's a fire splatter with red and orange and yellow and white, and it just looks gorgeous. Very, very happy to have these 2 in my collection because they seem to be coming increasingly hard to find. Now for something very different, Grasshopper by Cale, which is another record that my mum gave to me from her collection. I, like many people, am not really very into much country music at all, but this album really changed my mind because it definitely has some typical country tinges to it, but it does something really creative and genre-bending with them. And I really need to come back to this one because I remember on first listen I was highly impressed and surprised by this, so would recommend to anyone skeptical of the genre. Got a bit of krautrock in the collection. Not a big fan of that genre term. I'd rather call it just German experimental rock. But this was a specific scene of music in Germany in the late 60s and the 70s mostly, which I've been getting very, very into recently. It's kind of the scene which Kraftwerk emerged from, but I'd say they kind of do their own thing and are slightly separate post-self-titled albums from the scene. Whereas you get other bands who are more distinctly experimental rock. Probably my favourite of which is the band Can. Here is their debut album from 1969, Monster Movie. This is back when they had Malcolm Mooney as vocalist, later replaced by Damo Suzuki, but I think he brings his own very unique vocal flair to this album. The elephant in the room here has to be the final track, You Do Right, which covers the entire second side of the album, just jamming out into the stratosphere, which is kind of their first track that delves into this kind of grand and ambitious and experimental epic scope, which would permeate later releases, like the one I'm going to show you afterwards. But this is part of a recent reissue series of their albums, which all can come on coloured vinyl, and I picked up this gorgeous Mother Sky pressing, it's called itself, which is like blue with little marbled bits of white like clouds in the sky, and just looks beautiful and sounds gorgeous as well, so I'm very happy with this one. What I'm even more happy with is my favourite Can album, and possibly, I know this is quite a contentious thing to say, maybe even my favourite rock album of all time, Targo Margo. I cannot even begin to put into words how this album makes me feel. It's this absolutely gigantic double LP with only 7 tracks, 2 of them being longer than 17 minutes, two side-long tracks on here. I honestly, when music reaches the point that this album gets to, it just goes so far beyond words that I can only really say, listen to this goddamn album. It is so good. It's more like a spiritual voyage than an album, really. And I won't say any more than that. Not for the faint of heart, but in my eyes, an utter masterpiece. And this also comes on coloured vinyl. 2 discs of this orange translucent wax, which kind of like looks like how a calipo tastes. That's just how it makes me feel. Moving on, I have one record from Cardiacs, one of my dad's favourite bands. Absolutely bonkers and eccentric rock group who have a really tight-knit cult following. This is a 12-inch single of their track Day Is Gone, which I really, really need to listen to. I haven't actually put this on the turntable yet. This was my dad's record. I've listened to lots of Cardiacs LPs though, and really want to find one at some point, but some of them have never been repressed, and those original pressings go for crazy money. We do have, my dad believes, a copy of On Land and in the Sea somewhere, but we just haven't been able to find it. Hopefully we'll be able to track that down, because that's also a pretty insane collectible for Cardiacs fans. George Clanton, 100% Electronica. This is a kind of like nostalgic vaporwave synth pop mix. Very lo-fi, kind of like has this bedroom pop aesthetic. But I've played this so many times on my turntable. Just puts me in such a good mood. I'd say his second album, Slide, is even better than this one, but I'm just waiting to find that with reasonable shipping. But anyway, I would strongly, strongly recommend this album as just a piece of feel-good music. And this comes on this really, like, striking neon green disc, which I think is like slightly translucent, so it kind of looks like it lights up when you hold it in the light. Very different once more. Another one of my mum's LPs she gave to me, Tracy Chapman, her self-titled album. Absolutely gorgeous, intimate singer-songwriter music. Everyone knows the track Fast Car, of course, but it's chocked full of other beautiful music as well. Certainly a highly unique voice and a highly unique talent. Then I've got a few records from the Chemical Brothers, who are kind of one of my, like, longest term favorite electronic acts. There's a lot of bands I got into when I was like 9 or 10 who I've kind of gone off now, but I have never stopped adoring virtually all of the music that the Chemical Brothers put out. Classic 90s big beat group. The word iconic is very overused, but it does certainly apply here. Going chronologically, first I've got Setting Sun on a 12-inch single, featuring none other than Noel Gallagher on vocals. This is one of the most wild and psychedelic tracks they've made, off Dig Your Own Hole, which I would love to get on vinyl at some point. I don't know how I haven't. It's my favourite album of theirs at the moment. Electrobank, another 12-inch off Dig Your Own Hole, which is also probably the most room-shaking record in my collection. I don't know why, but the way the bass sounds on this thing, especially on this 45 RPM disc, is just like literally causes an earthquake every time I put it on. It's hilarious. But also just an absolute banger right here. Then unfortunately the only LP of theirs that I currently have is the original pressing of Surrender, which I got in a bundle with a few other records for not too much. This is probably like somewhere in like the middle tier of Chemical Brothers releases, because it does have a few weaker spots, but it also has several of their most brilliant creative tracks from their career. There's a lot of variety on this album. The Sunshine Underground, certainly one of the most underrated tracks of their career. Got Glint, Hey Boy, Hey Girl, still definitely worth having in my collection, and I do really love this artwork they've done with the gatefold and everything. Final two, I've got some more modern 12-inch singles. This is Free Yourself off their most recent album No Geography, with Mad as Hell electronic battle weapon version on the B-side. Very intense but very creative sound design, and definitely two of my favourites off that new album. I'd probably say I prefer this version of Mad as Hell to the original. It fleshes it out, takes it in new directions, and makes the whole thing feel more climactic and satisfying. And then finally I've got the recent 21 Minutes of Madness mix of Out of Control off Surrender. I was insanely excited when I heard about this because I adore the track Out of Control, and the idea of this epic extended mix seemed very, very promising to me. Unfortunately, I don't think this fully lives up to its potential, because I think they probably could have taken the track into new directions, whereas this mix tends to get a little repetitive and sometimes just repeat things that we've already heard. Still not a bad track by any means, and because I've got this numbered copy out of 1,999 as a nod to when the track was released, I'll probably be holding on to this for a while. Continuing with some more electronic music, I have Death Peak by Clark, which is an extremely underrated IDM album from about 4 years ago. Weird and dark and dissonant intentionally, with all of these like weird detuned synth leads, harsh and aggressive and in-your-face production. It's this really bizarre roller coaster ride of an album, which I found myself coming back to several times. Cool little Obi strip with this album, and some interesting gatefold images of these weird crinkled up photos. Very creative stuff all around, sonically and visually. Final two records here. First, I have a 12-inch single from The Comet is Coming, Imminent, featuring Joshua Idahan. I'd love to pick up one of their LPs, but I found this reduced all the way from £20, which is what it went for Record Store Day Black Friday or something, all the way down to £5. I love these guys' combination of electronics and jazz, so much energetic saxophone work in their music. extremely fun to listen to. And the final bit of vinyl I'm going to show you today is another vaporwave-ish release, this time in the subgenre of Mallsoft, I believe it's called. Cat System Corp, Oasis. I don't know how to describe this album to someone who hasn't heard it before, other than it feels pretty much exactly like standing in a giant, highly air-conditioned glass dome filled with all sorts of plants and water and wildlife, while this blissful, ethereal music plays over a tannoy. It is really, really atmospheric and evocative, and also very relaxing. Probably one of the single most played albums in my collection, and an absolutely gorgeous pressing on vinyl. It's another album with an obi strip here, and you can see it folds out with all this artwork of the water and these floating golden orbs. So the pressing I got is supposed to be blue, golden blue. There was a problem that they let us know about before many people bought the record, which is that the gold doesn't really look like gold, doesn't really show up. It's more of a kind of dark bluish greenish splodge in the middle of the blue. But for this reason they gave a discount on the price of the record, so I was still very happy, and especially happy because of how goddamn fantastic this pressing sounds. Cut at 45 RPM, which I guess makes it sort of louder and more spacious and clear. Unfortunately, I don't think this is available anymore. I'm pretty certain all of the variants sold out, but I would highly recommend this album if you're into vaporwave or just ambient, atmospheric and chill out music. And with that, we reach the end of part 2 of my vinyl collection series. I hope you've enjoyed my rambling to some degree. If you did, stay tuned for part 3, but for now, thank you for watching and see you next time.